Hi, I'm Ed Parcaut, your host of Inner Edison. And what I'd like you to take away from today's show is culture is really important to your business and everything that you deal with. And today's guest is the author on that. He's wrote the book about it, and his name is Andrew Y.J. Kim. And let's welcome him, get to know his journey. Did I get that right? Did I get your name right?
Yes, you did. Thanks for having me, Ed.
All right.
I,
Hey,
I
my
always enjoy,
pleasure.
yeah, I always enjoy talking about this topic simply because it was something that took me a long time to grasp and understand myself to the point that I felt compelled to write a book about it called Culture for the Left-Brained Leader.
Right. Because we were talking off air before we started this about how, for the longest time, I've been in business forever. And the first, 10 to 15 years, right out of the military, it was like, just do your job. What's your problem? What's the culture mean? But things have changed a lot in the last 20 years, and why don't you kind of get into how you got into this and why it's important to you?
Oh, absolutely. Ed, I was there too. I didn't see the importance of culture in the beginning as well too. I thought it was all about gathering some people and getting people to do their job. In fact, that's why it's called culture for the left brain leader. Left brain representing the logical side of us. So that being said, I'm a periodontist and MBA by training. And when I embarked upon my journey of entrepreneurship, I thought it was all about gathering the best systems and processes, figuring out a way how you're going to gather data and quality assure it. And when people are acting in ways that's not in congruence to the processes, you call it out. I thought that's how businesses worked. And in fact, I'll be honest, it did work in the beginning. You know why? Because you're there kind of monitoring everything. However, at a certain point, if you're trying to grow even further, I've come to realize that there's a point where it doesn't work as effectively anymore. You see, Ed, when you scale, what happens is there's too many things happening at once. You're not there to monitor everything. Things about processes and systems is that someone needs to be maintaining that as well too. Okay. And I've come to realize that if a lot of things don't come together at once as you try to scale, whether it's the demand that needs to be met whenever you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
grow, there's an increased demand. Your operating expenses go up even further as well too. That being said, it's harder to maintain the resonance with your customers at the same time with your team. There's too many things happening at once, and it led to a point where I was healthy in the green, and then all of a sudden I was in the red, bleeding tens of thousands a month, and not knowing when that's going to stop. It's a very terrifying situation. I still remember that time where I tried to solve it with by building more systems and processes on top of things.
Well, let's get straight. I mean, systems and processes are huge,
Oh
and a
yeah,
lot of
agreed.
lot of entrepreneurs don't even have those in place. I'm going to bring my military background into this. We have SOPs, standard operating procedures, right, in a book. That way, when the next person shows up, they can read the book, they can get going, and we're done. In my industry, we don't have that. Right, to a certain point, most companies don't have that same thing, so someone can take over. That's important, but if you, like you said, once you start growing and scaling your company, if your culture that you want in there is not in place, it's going to run amok and have major issues.
Uh,
So how do you resolve that?
Absolutely. Systems and processes are critically important, but it's not everything. It's not enough, is what I'm trying to say. In fact, it was a culture transformation, a paradigm shift of how I saw business that really flipped my situation around to turn it around and become healthier than ever before. And it was what helped us break past the plateau. That's what restored the quality of the service and also brought the team together again as well too. And along the way, I wanted to share that journey, that story. I pretty much reverse engineered kind of what I went through simply because I couldn't find very clear journeys or paths that laid it out. The way I did it was I engaged a coach slash consultant to kind of walk us through the process. And that being said, we never used the word culture once. We threw the term management and leadership around. But after going through everything, On retrospect, I realized what we had done was we transformed the culture, and it was a very confusing journey as well too. So I wanted to provide clarity on that, and that's why I pretty much wrote the book and help other companies achieve similar things as well too.
So how can you create the culture you want in your company? What's the easiest way to do that? I'll tell you my way that I did it, and maybe it's not the right way. I had somebody who was complaining a lot about things and certain things and how the company wasn't this, and they wanted this kind of stuff. So I put them in charge of helping me create the culture and write the book on it for the company, which that worked for me because that was a one person who was so adamant about it that worked. But a lot of companies don't just have that, but you want to kind of set this from the beginning, right?
Oh, absolutely. And well, first of all, it's to recognize that it's critically important. And the reason why that's so important is because if we don't recognize that, we're not going to do anything about it. In fact, it took hitting a brick wall from on my end in order to acknowledge that I needed to do something about it. So first, opening our minds to it is critically important. Now, let's talk about how we do it, because it seems like a fluffy and squishy topic, right?
Right.
And that being said, it may seem ambiguous on what to do. You had someone in order to implement various things, but why don't we try to break down some of the things that they probably did? Okay,
Right.
and oftentimes, if you ask such people who just instinctually think culture, oftentimes they have trouble rationalizing and explaining it, and that's why this perspective could be extremely valuable. I like to broach upon 5 pillars to discuss it. Okay.
Okay.
The first one is what I like to call the rituals or rhythms of the organization. It's pretty much at what frequencies do you touch base, and what do you talk about during that? The reason why that's important is because oftentimes it's what gets organizations to be aligned. Now, a lot of companies have top-down meetings that is very tactical in nature and very directive in nature. Okay, but there's very little that is focusing on alignment. So for the sake of time, I'll just share one ritual that companies oftentimes overlook. The first one is one-on-ones. Okay, it's pretty much a time where you just meet with your team or your employee one-on-one, or if it's not your employee, it's at least your team member.
Right.
And it's a chance to talk about not necessarily what needs to be done, but cover what's going on in life. To touch on the human element of things. Like, for instance, if someone is about to have a baby and you don't know about it, it's probably not as cool, right? The second one is,
well, I'm going to go back to this because
Yeah.
My wife works for a large company, the hospital. They have insurance. I won't say the name. And they have, I just started listening to what she does. She has all those one-on-ones with all her employees. And that was not something I did. So now it's something I put in place, monthly, to kind of get to know with each one of my employees where you're at, what's going on, kind of stuff. And then each manager's going to do the same thing. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm just saying it is very valuable what you're saying about one-on-ones.
Absolutely. And you know what? I actually picked that one up from when I was looking at various progressive technology companies, because it's a very common practice there. But if you look at a lot of traditional organizations, they don't do it, or they don't even know about it. So it's very interesting seeing one side of the world where it's a common practice. Oh yeah, of course we do it. And another side of the world where it's completely foreign and unheard of. So I think it's a very valuable practice to input. But let's talk further about what we can cover during those one-on-ones. Like, what's going on in life is one of them. Another one is, are they doing a good job or not, and how do they know? Because a lot of employees we think that they know whether they're doing a good job or not, but oftentimes there's a confusion there. Another one is, what tools do they have available to them? A lot of team members, they don't fully grasp what resources they have in front of them, like resources for training or various tools. A fourth one is, what are their strengths and weaknesses? Okay, in terms of developing their strengths and covering up their weaknesses more. Okay, it's a much more holistic approach of managing. The fifth one is, what are their aspirations? See, when we capture these conversations on a regular basis, it changes the dynamic of the management and employee relationship. As you can see, it's more likely you'll be able to get a higher productivity, but at the same time, greater engagement and a better relationship, which can further improve retention as well too.
I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
the biggest, I mean, you're not saying anything that I don't all of a sudden now do. And it's important to, because you need to know what these people, because a lot of leaders and a lot of people only go to somebody when they're doing something wrong, right? So
Right.
it's like your kid correcting your kids when they do something wrong. And so all they hear is from dad that you're wrong all the time instead of helping them understand certain things. But and no, you're wrong. I don't believe in the participation trophies at all that a lot of these people do. I believe,
celebrate mediocrity.
Yeah. The one thing my dad taught me when I was a kid was the life's not fair, and you need to realize that it's what we make it, right? And basically what it is. And the reason that we have this capitalistic society, and I don't want to get into politics, is so that, you have the opportunity. The harder you work, the more you make, the more you can do, the smarter, that kind of stuff. So that opportunity is here. A lot of the immigrants who are coming here still have that, where a lot of I'm talking my kids, other people's kids, they don't have that ingrained them in there anymore. So I see that a lot more with the immigrants who have come here. They're like, this is such a great opportunity. You guys are wasting it. I know I'm getting on a different subject, but they're easier to deal with than the regular people who are here in the United States that want everything for nothing. But also, it's important to set culture in your company so you get the people you want, not who you just receive. All right. So you had the 5 things. What else do you want to add to what you just went through?
The second one is how we approach our everyday moments. Okay. And rather than a directive approach where we just assume that people should do a good job just because we're paying them,
That's not how it works.
No, maybe it did before, but in today's society, that's largely changing. Now we have to.
I want to go back. I like the old way. Just do your damn job.
Yeah. So basically, now it's more about what are our goals, okay, and how do we engage our people to accomplish them, okay. And let me just tell you one type of interaction, because again, for the sake of time, one type of interaction that took me a major paradigm shift in order for me to approach them differently. Now, as a manager or leader, I mean, we're typically in such a situation because we're good at what we do. We know what needs to be done, right? So a lot of things tends to escalate to us, right? With issues and problems that need to be solved. Now, it's so easy to habitually just tell them what to do because we can kind of see what needs to be done. However, I've come to realize that it's counterintuitive. By doing that, I've created a dependence of people on me. It didn't really give them a chance to grow. I've come to realize that what needed to happen was to bring their ideas to the table, and they may not feel comfortable with it at first. I've come to realize that even if what I can come up with is more intricate in terms of the idea, it would only win out in the short term simply because they didn't know my ideas inside and out. As long as their idea is going the right general direction, and I'll be honest, there are times where you had to guide them there a little bit. But if it's coming from them, it tends to win out in the long term, even if the idea isn't as intricate. And the reason why is because they know it inside and out. They're engaged into it. And not only that, here's the biggest kicker. Curveballs are going to be thrown at them throughout the course of their work. Now, if it's not their idea, they won't know what to do. They won't be able to pivot and adapt. However, from theirs, they can pivot and adapt and demonstrate a lot more agility than if it was just yours alone. So I've come to realize by managing how I address, or maybe not address, but respond with more of a coaching approach rather than a directive approach to these everyday moments. Eventually, it builds a critical mass where ownership is more commonplace. And not only that, there's situational problem solving, because a lot of managers and leaders want that in their teams. But then sometimes they struggle in how to achieve that.
it'll make your life easier if you can get them to do that, so they don't just come to you. They learn how to deal with their own issue, certain things. Give them the authority to make their own decisions on certain things, so that doesn't have to come up for every time. And that that takes a while to get people to understand that, hey, I've given you this authority to this certain point. Only after this do you have to come to me for everything. That makes our lives easier, our managers' lives easier. And like you said, I like the approach of coaching employees to be, because the one thing I found about doing this for the last over a year is that you, as business owners, one, it's very lonely at the top. Two, we need to be coached, have cornermen, whatever you want to call it. Need to be part of strategic, different groups and all that kind of stuff, so that you can grow. We need to do the same thing for our employees, so they feel that and they can grow, so that they can turn into whatever they want to be.
Oh, absolutely. And the motto should be using everyday moments as coaching moments whenever we can.
Yeah, but that's great. But I mean, how do you find the right coaching, the everyday moments that are right to be coached? And, I mean, we still, as us and managers, you're not just a manager, but you still have other stuff that you do, right? We work. So, I mean, this is very challenging to just bring this in, especially for a small company growing. But if you put it in place early on, then it's easier to adapt down the road as you grow. And so I think that's very important. But how do you set culture? If you're just starting a company, how do you set the culture from the beginning?
Well, that's a good question. And if you're in the very beginning, right? If you're in the very beginning, then sometimes the priorities are a little bit different, because we still need to identify market fit. Okay. We're still,
I know, but say that we have all that.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And we have all that. We have that in. I want to set from the beginning that I want to make sure that I have culture, so I don't run into things that have happened in the companies before. I know a few people who have companies and they didn't address culture early on, and it became a major problem when there were large, extremely large companies. All of a sudden, now they have a culture issue. How can you address that from the beginning so that you don't run into that?
I mean,
that's really my question.
It's the paradigm shift. First of all, the mindset and some of the stuff that we're describing. I mean, it's a lot of things, a lot of habits that we have to introspectively look at how we approach different situations and interactions and address them. And it leads to my third pillar, which is how we approach the psychology of change. And the reason why that's important is because we are, in essence, approaching those moments differently, and people aren't used to it. Even if it's pretty evident that this is beneficial for both sides, both in terms of the management and leaderships, and also the various team members, oftentimes people don't see it right off the bat. Change triggers fear and stress, okay? And it's important to recognize that. So when we're starting to approach those moments differently, that we have to understand and be empathetic to those emotions that they're going to feel when we approach those things differently, especially if it's the first time we approach those interactions differently. They're going to think, what are you doing, boss? we got a fire to put out.
So I still haven't. So basically, there isn't really. So what, I didn't hear exactly how to start that process from the beginning. So one of the questions. So it might be better to find a company's culture that you enjoy, right? That you see that you want to represent in your company, right? Are you following what I'm trying to get at? Because
yes.
I mean, because you're not going to be able to hit everything. I mean, today, society and the way our employees they want a purpose. They want something in a company. They want that company is doing something for what they believe in, right? Besides what they sell, they're doing some other thing. And go ahead.
That kind of skips over to the fifth pillar, actually.
What's the fourth one? Did we miss the fourth one?
Yeah. The fourth one is actually reassessing our business processes and how we approach HR, simply because the workflow is very different. Okay. Just like the customer experience journey, it's good to look at the employee experience journey, because we can identify little details along the way that we can really make a difference on how employees perceive the company. Besides that, if we should look at our business processes that we have in place. If they're inundated with like over documentation, it loses resonance. Processes should be simple. It should be adaptable, not dumbed down. I say it's similar to the transition that we made when we went from the traditional MP3 player to the iPod. It was more elegant in design. It was more user-friendly. It wasn't dumbed down in terms of engineering. It was also still an engineering marvel. So having the mindset of simplifying our processes so people can resonate better with it, be transparent more with data, and on top of that, what it does is it gives people flexibility and adaptability in terms of expressing themselves, developing themselves, and applying their own strengths into their job roles. The other comparable, if someone is wondering about a specific situation, let's just say you have your job is picking up phones all day long. You have a script for every single situation.
Yes, you do. You need to.
Yes, but then if they are following the script to the letter, it number one, the employee engagement might be reduced, and on top of that, customers can actually tell when things are a little bit more robotic. But rather when there's a guidance on the various scenarios and how to approach those scenarios, we can reach a more human element to it. So it's really the difference between, is everything scripted versus is there guidance? I'm not saying not to have guidance. We do need the systems and processes in place, but to create a more user-friendly version of it.
Right. But I also think that you have that part where they understand the scripts, they memorize them and then make them their own, right?
That's
how,
right.
Because that's I'm going to go back to how I learned to sell in my industry was I created a whole process so that I took people through the same process all the way. So I didn't miss anything going through that process. And if there was ever any issues, I'd add it back into that process so that would know it going forward. And I think the most important thing is if you do have these scripts, they need to memorize, they need to understand them, make them their own so that they sound natural, but they hit every point. So, all right. So we went through the HR. So what was 5 again?
The fifth one is how we approach strategy. Now, strategy and culture, in my viewpoint, they're interrelated. Okay? They're not separate topics. And the reason why is because a good strategy or vision can strengthen the culture, and a good culture improves the results of the strategy. Okay. Now, oftentimes when a culture transformation effort is kicked off, there are diagnostic efforts done beforehand, if applicable. If we're small enough, then the leaders and managers will probably already know. However, at a certain scale, then they might need some diagnostic information. On top of that, one of the best kickoffs is really through the announcement of a strategy. If we only just approach things from an everyday moment, sometimes we don't get people to take it seriously. I found one of the most effective ways to initiate the transformation process is through a strategy announcement. This is where we want to go, okay? And in order to achieve that, we're going to have to approach our culture differently. And here are the various values that are important to us in order to accomplish that. Sometimes it's good to democratize a process a little bit. It really depends on what you're starting off with, because sometimes it's difficult to do so due to the sheer size of the organization. So that being said, once you kick it off, people take it a bit seriously. Now, they're also going to test whether you're serious about this or not. Okay. In order to maximize resonance during that announcement, I like to recommend hitting 4 different points. Like what needs to be done by when is one point. Okay. Another one is why are we doing this? A third one is who's doing what? And a fourth one is what's changing and what's not changing. The reason why that's so critically important is that every person has different personalities and captures information differently. By hitting those 4 points throughout various strategy discussions with people, you're catering to multiple personality types. Like some people, they just want to know what needs to be done by when. Some people, they're completely motivated by why are we doing this? They just want to understand the why. Some people, again, they just want to know how it impacts their people. But here's a biggest kicker. I found the fourth one. What's changing and what's not changing to be the lion's share concern. Because people are wondering, how does this impact my job? Is it going to be different? Is the security of my job at risk? They're wondering about these kinds of things. I find that about half of the people are actually thinking about that more so than the vision of the organization itself. In fact, when I coach leaders in kicking off an effort like this, I recommend talking about the strategy because they're usually very strategic and visionary in nature, but moving on very quickly to these concerns because this is what people are thinking about. That optimizes your chance that you're going to get people to buy in earlier. It's also important to understand and be realistic about the buy-in process. You're not going to get everyone right off the bat, especially if you haven't been doing things like this, okay? Remember, the third pillar was understanding the psychology of change, okay? So that means that you're going to have to identify your early adopters, partner with them. You're going to have to partner with them in order to get educate and get further buy-in of the majority. And in terms of the laggards, first of all, sometimes they have real logistical concerns, and you can get them to be an early adopter by hearing them out and integrating their concerns into the direction that you're going. But at the same time, some of them just take a long time to buy in. It's just important to understand that while you're going through this transformation process.
Right. People hate change. That's all it is.
Yeah.
People hate change. They hate it at all. I don't care. They don't. And I deal with that all the time with people, customers, clients, you name it. People, and I tell people all the time, people don't like change. People don't like making a decision. The only, they make decisions out of pain or pleasure. Most of the time they make their decision out of pain because they wait for so long until they have to do something. So it's really difficult to get people on board, but you can. And just like you said, it just takes time. Anything else you want to add today before we go? Because you did give us a lot about culture, how to look at it. What was the name of your book?
A Culture for the Left Brain Leader. That's
right. And where's that on Amazon? Where's that located?
You can find it on Amazon. If anyone wants to reach out to me, they can reach me at andrew@cultureandstrategy.com. You can also find us on our webpage, www.cultureandstrategy.com. Also, you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as Andrew YJ Kim.
That's right. YJ. Got to have that YJ in there.
Right. Otherwise, you can't find me.
Common name. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's a very common name.
Yeah, I'm lucky. There's only about 11 of us left in the United States. So, Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your insight. I'm going to hit you up for a book, especially a signed book by you, if that's possible.
Cool.
All right. And if you guys enjoy what we do here, please follow, share, let people know about what we're doing here. Inner Edison's here to help people understand that when you're in business, you need to have people along the way to help you. That's why I bring people on like Andrew today to talk about how to set up culture in your company, because it's very important, because if you don't, it's going to really come up and bite you down the road, right?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Andrew, thank you so much for being here today. And again, have a great day.